Welcome to the January session of Daring to Learn. The Daring to Learn webinar series is a monthly webinar hosted by the UT Center for Profitable Agriculture. My name is Elena Boyd. If you have been around Daring to Learn for a while, you probably recognize me from all the reminder emails and introducing the sessions every month as we kick off. I am an extension specialist with the Center for Profitable Agriculture, and I'm excited to kick off our webinar series once again this year. We've got a brand new year in 2026. This will be our third year, so we're up to year three of running the Daring to Learn webinar series. I have with us today Kortni Blalock from CPA. She is one of our newer extension specialists, newest, I think, actually. She started in July of this year. So Kortni will be moving through a presentation today on business licenses and sales tax. Just a couple of housekeeping things that I kind of want to talk through as we get started this morning before I hand things over to Kortni. If this is your first time joining us for a Daring to Learn session, I mentioned earlier, this is a monthly webinar series, so always hosted on the second Tuesday of every month. If you have signed up for this series, you should get reminder emails when a session is coming up. These are recorded and then posted to CPA's YouTube channel, so you can always go back after each live session and watch a recording as needed. We send the links out for those recordings in our follow-up emails to all the registered participants. There is not a cost at all to attend the webinar or to access those videos. One other thing that I will add, if you are a Tennessee producer and you're looking for Tennessee Agricultural Enhancement Program credit, that's the TAEP program, Daring to Learn does qualify you for one educational credit for that application B for TAEP. So that can go towards the producer diversification section of TAEP. It does not count for that application A for some of those things more geared towards production agriculture. You guys should be able to pop questions into the chat as we move through. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to put those into the chat box. There's also a Q&A feature and a way to raise your hand. So if you have maybe a question that would take too long to type and it would be easier to kind of ask that, I can turn your microphone on and let you ask that out loud. So that's all of our housekeeping stuff kind of at the beginning of the session. So I will go ahead and let Kortni introduce herself, and then I will hand things over to her.
Alrighty. Hi, hello, y'all. My name is Kortni Blalock. I am an extension specialist here at the Center for Profitable Agriculture. I have a focus specifically in enterprise management, and I started last year in July. And so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Oops, I'm sorry.
We
Can
can see it.
everyone see that? Okay, great. Okay, so I'm here. I'm very excited to participate in this meeting and share more information about business licenses, business tax, and sales tax. I know that it can be really difficult to understand and it's a lot of information, but I hope that this presentation clears up some of the confusion. So a little more about me. Again, I did start last year. I'm originally from Georgia, and I got my bachelor's degree in agribusiness from North Carolina A&T State University. And then I got my master's degree in agriculture and resource economics at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. So just starting off with a disclaimer, this presentation is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice, nor is it intended to be a substitute for the services of a competent legal professional. So I do highly recommend reaching out to tax professionals and the Tennessee Department of Revenue. This is just mainly an overview of the business licenses and sales tax. So some of the session objectives are for farmers and others who are engaged in the agricultural field, who are directly involved with direct marketing, value-added agriculture, and agritourism. And so, again, this presentation is just to help make complex, confusing, and unique farmer situations more straightforward. So as we go through, we're going to look at the purpose, and then we're going to have what I call BLAST questions, which stands for business license and sales tax questions. And so those are going to be spread out through the presentation to bring context to the information. Then we're going to go business licenses to business tax, sales tax, and then if there are any questions at the end, but also if you have any questions throughout, go ahead and put them in, the Q&A in the chat. So for the purpose, it is very important for farmers to understand if they need a business license, how sales tax rules apply to them, any potential exemptions, the appropriate certificates, and any additional reference sources. So starting off with business licenses, a business license is a legal document that allows a business to operate in a specific geographic location. And so businesses are required to have a license, must obtain a license for each county and municipality if required by the city. So let's say, for example, you have a store in Nashville, you would need a business license for both Nashville and a business license for Davidson County. And then if you were to open a second store under the same business in Columbia, Tennessee, you would need another business license for Columbia. So it's based on location, just not the entity. And then in Tennessee, all 95 counties require business licenses. So a business license is required for any business whose profit has a gross annual sales of more than $3,000 in a business location. And this is based off the same year end as the IRS, which is normally in December. And then your business only needs a business license for its permanent locations, and they consider permanent being more than 6 months. So if you're conducting at temporary locations, I believe that requires a different license. But speaking of business licenses, we're talking about permanent locations. So the main two types of business licenses, you have the minimal activities. So this is where gross annual sales are over $3,000, but less than $100,000. As we go throughout this presentation, the thresholds are going to be very specific. It's $15 per location, and you do not have to pay business tax at all. However, there is also a standard business license where gross annual sales are $100,000. If your gross annual sales are $100,000 or more, you need a standard business license. You will also have to pay business tax as well. And soon we're going to go into the exemptions. So here we have some exemptions. So you do not need a business license or to pay business tax for a farm's sale of its own raised products. So if you are growing tomatoes and you sell them, you do not need a business license. You also do not need a business license or have to pay business tax for a farm sale of its value-added products, where you're only using what you raised on the farm, and then the only non-raised ingredients are right over here. There's water, sugar, pectin, salt, and preservatives. And then lastly, you do not have to pay for a business license or pay business tax for a farm sale of its admission to tours or activities that are purely educational. So we're talking about no amusement and no entertainment. So looking more into the difference between agritourism in terms of educational and non-educational, for the educational side, it has to be purely educational. So this is where like a farm tour where you're just showing guests, how a farm operates, or you're giving a demonstration. And so those admission sales are not subject to a business license or business tax. Whereas non-educational, again, that's going to be amusement, recreation, or entertainment. So let's say you have a slide on your property, taking a hayride, those admission sales are going to be subject to a business license and business tax. And so as we go forward, these are the main three pillars that we should keep with. So farm products, value-added ingredients, and then agritourism. So when we look here, again, if you raised your own farm products and you only have, or if you have a value added, let's say you made jam and it only has those five of the water, sugar, salt, pectin, and preservatives, or your agritourism is purely educational with no limit on annual sales, then you do not need a business license or to pay business tax. And when we look to see if you purchase farm products to sell, or you have a value-added ingredient that has more than those five exemptions, or your agritourism is non-educational, but your total annual sales are $3,000 or less, you still will not need a business license or business tax. However, if your total annual sales are greater than 3,000, but less than 100,000, that's when you need the minimal activity business license and you'll pay no business tax. And then if your total annual sales are $100,000 or more, then you're going to need both the standard activity business license and to pay business tax. So I know that it's already a lot of information, but here's a chart that kind of sums it up, putting into the farm sales category and then the minimal, saying that if you have raised products, if you have value-added products, your value-added products with salt, water, sugar, pectin, or preservatives, and purely educational, you don't need a minimal activity license, and you don't need to pay business tax. And then going back into looking at if you purchase farm products to sell, if you have value-added ingredients with more than those non-raised ingredients, or an agritourism that is non-educational, then that's when you get into the thresholds. And so here we're going to get into some examples to understand the context. So here we have Farmer Sophie, who raises pumpkins and makes pumpkin pies in a commercial kitchen on her farm. Sophie's annual pumpkin pie sales total 3,500. She uses the pumpkin she raised and eggs from her chicken, plus pastry, pumpkin pie spice, and sugar to make the pies. Does she need a business license or to pay business tax? So we can see here that she does raise her own pumpkins and that her pie sales are $3,500. But we also see here that she included pastry, pumpkin pie spice, and sugar. Because of that, she's going to need a minimal activity business license because she used more than the five exemptions of the water, sugar, salt, pectin, and preservatives. And she will not be paying business tax. Here we have Farmer Jane. She sells tomatoes that she raised for $6,000. She also purchases tomatoes and sells them on her on-farm stand for $10,000. Her annual total sales are $16,000. Jane keeps accurate records of her sales of both her raised and purchased products. Does she need a business license or to pay business tax? So again, we see that she raised $6,000 worth of her own raised tomatoes, but then she also purchased some for $10,000. She's going to need a minimal activity business license. But again, to pay no business tax. Here we have Farmer Tom. So Farmer Tom has a pumpkin patch with a corn maze, slide, and other recreational activities. Within the year, he sells his pumpkins, his raised pumpkins, for $10,000. Tom's also sells admission tickets to his agritourism operation for $60,000, food and drinks from his concession stand for $22,000, and t-shirts and apparel for $20,000. So does he need a business license or to pay business tax? So we see he has a pumpkin patch and all his activities, and that we see that he also did raise and sell his own pumpkins. However, we see that he has extra agritourism events, and so he's going to need a standard business license when we add up the 60,000, the 20,000, and the $22,000. So he will need a standard business license and he will pay business tax. Then lastly, we have farmer Isabella. She has a cow dairy and makes cheese for the milk. She also uses salt, starter cultures, and rennet are added to the milk during the cheese making process. Farmer Isabella retails her cheese through her e-commerce site and farm store, and she wholesales her cheese products through a distributor. Her annual sales of cheese at retail are $40,000, and her wholesale through a distributor are $250,000. Will she have to pay business license? Well, does she need a business license and to pay business tax? So looking, we see she makes cheese. She adds in the salt, the cultures, the rennet. She retails and wholesales. We will get into that a little later in the presentation, but we see that she's obviously over the $100,000 annual sale threshold. So she's going to she's going to need pay business tax, but then also have a standard business license. So looking into business tax, we see that business tax is a privilege tax that permits one to engage in the business of selling tangible personal property and rendering certain services. So again, when a business has total annual sales of over $100,000 or more per year. So business tax is also going to depend upon different classifications and subclassifications. You will pay it based on your dominant business activity. This also again varies whether you are selling retail or wholesale. And then there's going to be a minimum tax of $22 per business. So here's just kind of a short, very condensed list that I got from the Tennessee Department of Revenue, explaining the different classifications, what they're for, the description, and we can see that there is both a retail tax rate and a wholesale tax rate. What we're mainly going to focus on for this presentation is classification class 1A and then class 3. So we see that for 1A is for businesses, for food and beer for home consumption. We see the retail rate 0.001, wholesale rate 0.00025, and then class 3. So that's for services, businesses, and those that sell tangible personal properties. We can also see just a short description, delicatessens, pet food, candy, and bait, but there is more information on TDR's website. We both see again the difference in the retail tax rate and the wholesale tax rate. Also looking at the difference between retailers and wholesalers. So to be considered a retailer, at least 50% of your taxable gross sales need to be retail sales. So on the other end, at least for a wholesaler, at least 50% of the taxable gross sales need to be wholesale. So looking at examples, when we just looked at Farmer Tom and we saw that he sold admission tickets, which were worth $60,000. He also had a concession stand that was worth $22,000 and then apparel for $20,000, all requiring that he has a business license and pays business tax. We see that based on the dominant business activity, which is admission tickets, that's going to be considered a service. And that was class 3. So class 3 is for it's the classification for service businesses, and that retail rate was 0.001875. So take the total profit, multiply it to the business tax rate, and this is the business tax that would need to be paid. We also had the example of Farmer Isabella with her cheese sales. We saw that when she sold her cheese retail, it was $40,000, but when she sold them wholesale, she earned $250,000. So the dominant business activity for her is to sell a cheese, which will go under the classification 1A. So because she's based on a wholesaler, she's going to use the wholesale rate. So take her total business profit to a wholesale rate, and then that's the business tax you'll have to pay. And so when is business tax due? So business tax is due on the 15th day of the fourth month following the end of the business's fiscal year. So if your business, the end of your business's fiscal year is the same as the calendar year, then you will need to pay your business tax by April 15th. But let's say, for example, you had a business that fiscal year ended on June 30th. Well, then you would pay your business tax by October 15th. And again, how is it paid? So businesses must file a business tax return and pay the tax electronically on TDR's website using the Tennessee Taxpayer Access Point. So looking over, this is what the website will look like. You have the option to log in. Then you have more options such as payments, returns, registration, and much more on TDR's website. So now we are also going to get into sales tax. So we're going to identify and explain sales tax rules, explain sales tax exemptions, describe when sales tax is due, describe sales tax rates, explain how to get registered and document taxes and purchases, and then provide more information about the sales tax implications for value-added farm products and agritourism operations. So directly from the Tennessee Department of Revenue, sales tax are transitional taxes applied to the sale or use of tangible personal property or specific services in Tennessee. And they are generally applied to the retail sales of any business, organization, or person engaged in making retail sales. And so, in terms of understanding the sales tax rate, I kind of created this decision tree to understand when they get tacked on and added together. And so, when we're starting at the top here to collect sales tax, we're going to further in the presentation, we're going to talk about the exemptions. But for now, let's say we are going to collect sales tax. So each county has a local rate, and your local rate is going to be between 2.25% and 2.75%. And that's just based on location. From there, there is going to be a fork in the road where is what you're selling, is it a food or food ingredient? If it is a food ingredient, then the tax rate for the food is only going to be it's going to be 4% compared to the state rate, which is 7%. So when the food rate is 4%, the highest combined sales tax rate that you can have will be 6.75%. However, if what you're selling is not classified as a food or food ingredient, then you will have to pay, collect the state rate. And the highest that the state rate can be is 9.75%. And so coming back over to some of the exemptions. So again, if a farmer raised the product, then they are exempt from sales tax, from collecting sales tax. So this is with livestock products, nursery stock, poultry, fruits and vegetables, all. And then this is also regardless of the purchaser or location. So that can be in person, online. And so additionally, there is no paperwork or registration or approval needed. But just in case you're asked, you need to be able to provide proof that your products meet the specific exemptions. And again, there is no annual sales limit. So here we have an example of Farmer Jill. Let's say she raises 1,000 strawberries and sells to consumers for $8 each for a total of $8,000. Are her farm products subject to sales tax? No, she's not going to have to pay. She raised them, she sold them, she does not have to collect sales tax. However, there is another exemption, which is going to be the 50% exemption when it comes to a farmer purchasing farm products to sell. So if we look over here, we can see that the dark blue color is farm raised products, and the light blue color are the purchase products. So if in a total annual year, your farm raised products, the sale of your farm raised products exceeds over 50% of what you purchase to sell, then you do not have to collect sales tax at all on the entire total annual sales if your farm raised product sales exceed your purchase product sales. However, on the opposite end of the spectrum, if your purchase product sales exceed your farm raised sales, you just have to collect sales tax on your purchase products only. Because if they're farm raised, you're not going to collect sales tax on that. However, if your purchase products exceed your farm raised product sales in a total annual year, you will have to collect sales tax on the purchase only. And so again, so this is for farm or nursery products. The sales period is a calendar year. And let's say if the farmer is uncertain about the 50% test, there is a consideration to collect sales tax on all the purchase products. So here's an example. So in the same calendar year, Farmer Greg raises and sells peppers for $8,000. He also sells peppers to consumers for $5,000 that were bought for resale from the farmer who raised them. Farmer Greg's pepper sales totaled $13,000. Does sales tax need to be collected? So we see that he did raise and sell his own peppers, but also bought some for retail. When we look at the pie chart, we can see that his raised peppers, which were $8,000, exceeds his purchased peppers, meaning that sales tax is not going to be collected because the purchased peppers are less than 50% of the total sale. Now, let's say once again, it's still Farmer Greg who he sold peppers for that he raised for $8,000. But then he also sells peppers to consumers that he bought for resale for $10,000. His total sales are $18,000. Does sales tax need to be collected? So now we can see in this instance that the sale of his purchased peppers exceeds that 50% exemption. And so, yes, he will need to collect sales tax only on the purchased peppers sales because they exceed 50% of the total sales. And we have one more as well. So in the same calendar year, Farmer Greg raises and sells peppers for $8,000. He purchases peppers from a broker and resells them to consumers for $7,000. Does sales tax need to be collected? So again, he raises them and he resells some that he bought for $7,000. Well, we can see in the pie chart here that his raised peppers, they exceed the 50% exemption of the total sale. However, up in red here, he got them from a broker, not from the farmer who raised them. Because he didn't get them directly from the farmer who raised them, he's going to have to pay sales tax on the purchased peppers. And then just coming back one more time to the combined sales tax rate, we did the exemptions, and then we have, again, coming back to collecting the sales tax, you have a local rate, but then you also have the food or the state rate, 7%, food rate 4%. And we have another example. So let's say farmer A lives in Lebanon, Tennessee, and just sold $100 worth of taxable food products. The local food tax in Lebanon is 2.75%, and the state food tax is 4%. How much will a consumer pay? So when we combine in decimal form, the local sales tax, which is 0.0275, and the state food tax, 0.04, we're going to have a combined tax of 0.0675. We then take the original food sale, multiply it to the combined tax, and you'll get the total tax on the food product is going to be 6.75. So then we again take the original food sale of $100, have the total tax on the food product, which is 6.75, and the final sale is going to be 106.75. And here below is just a little chart to show the complete sale, but which portions of it, the local sales tax in the middle blue, and then the state food tax as the lightest blue. So it has been a lot of information, but there is another exemption. So a farmer or a business is not required to have a sales tax account or collect sales tax if their annual gross sales are $4,800 or less, and their taxable services are above $1,200 per year, and the seller pays Tennessee sales tax to its suppliers. So in this specific situation, it has to be both. It's a annual gross sales are 4,800, and it has to be that the seller pays Tennessee's sales tax to its suppliers. It has to fall into both. In terms of the value-added farm products, it's the same in that the farmer must raise the products used to make the value-added product. And then the only non-raised ingredients can be, again, water, sugar, pectin, salt, and preservatives. And same as the agritourism as well, when basing on the educational versus non-educational, we have the clearly educational, a farm tour versus the non-educational in terms of amusement. And so looking at an example, so Farmer Manny raises and sells oranges for $3,000, and the oranges he purchased from another farmer sold to consumers for $4,000. He paid sales tax to the supplier. For his total sales are $7,000. Does sales tax need to be collected? So he raises and sells them, but then he also purchased them for $4,000. So even though we can see down here that his purchase oranges sales exceed that 50% exemption, because he paid sales tax to the supplier and his purchase orange sales are less than that $4,800 threshold, then he does not have to collect sales tax. And here we see Farmer Sophie again. She raised her pumpkins and she made pumpkin pies, and her total sales were 3,500. Again, she used the pumpkins, eggs from her kitchen, but she included the pastry, pumpkin pie spice, and sugar to make the pies. In this scenario, she paid sales tax to the supplier for her value-added ingredients. So we already know that she had to had to apply for a minimal activity business license and not pay business tax. Sorry. However, she's also not going to pay sales tax. And then we have Farmer Daisy. So Farmer Daisy grows pumpkins on her farm. She starts two agritourism ventures. So she'll offer a hayride through the pumpkin patch, and she's also allowing consumers to pick their own pumpkin. So if an $8 admission is charged per person for the hayride and one pumpkin, does she need to collect sales tax? So she grows her own pumpkins. She decides to do a hayride and one pumpkin. She's going to need to collect sales tax because the agritourism activity and her farm raised product are combined. So there are other options and preferences that you can make in this scenario as well. So again, as we saw, she had her farm raised product, which was the pumpkin, plus her non-educational farm activity, which was the hayride, and she had to collect sales tax on the entire sales. However, she also has the option to separate out her receipts and have the farm raised product have no sales tax collected, but then just for the non-educational farm activity, collect sales tax there. So there's just many different options. It's based on your preference and record keeping. So looking at how to apply for sales tax registration, we see you can go to, again, apply on the Tennessee Taxpayer Access Point, which is on the Tennessee Department of Revenue. And then you will receive a certificate of registration where you will also receive a certificate of resale. And so the certificate of resale is to purchase items for resale without paying sales tax when you provide a copy of your certificate. You also have the option to apply for the agricultural sales and use tax certificate of exemption. So this exemption, certificate of exemption isn't for buying products for resale, but it can be used to buy things such as containers or lids or labels for value-added products and things of that nature. And so just wrapping up, because it has been a lot of information, a lot of thresholds, a lot of exemptions, we see that in the scenario, if is a farm-raised product, and if it only contains the five exempt ingredients of water, sugar, salt, pectins, or preservatives, and or the agritourism is purely educational for any sale, for any total annual sales, you do not need a business license and you do not need to pay business tax. If you have purchased products, you use more than the five exempt ingredients, or have a non-educational agritourism, but it's $3,000 or less, you still do not need a business license or to pay business tax. However, with the same scenario, if your total annual sales are more than $3,000 and less than $100,000, you will need a minimum activity business license, but not to pay business tax. And then again, in the same scenario, if your total annual sales are $100,000 or more, you will need a standard business license and to pay business tax. So looking at the scenario when it comes to sales tax, again, if you have farm-raised products, the five exempt ingredients in the value-added product, or again, educational agritourism, any total annual sales, then you do not pay sales tax or collect sales tax. And then for all other products, if your total annual sales happen to be $4,800 or less, as long as you pay sales tax on your purchases, you also do not have to collect sales tax. But if you happen to go over that threshold of $4,800, so if your total annual sales are 4,800 or more, then you will also have to collect sales tax. So looking here at the sources, all my sources are coming from the Tennessee Department of Revenue. And so this first one is the Tennessee Agricultural Tax Manual. It's pretty long, but it has really a lot of great resources in it. Then you can look at their local sales tax rate to see, based on your county, what your sales tax rate is. You then have the information to look for the exemptions, certificates, and credits. And then lastly, here is the link for looking for sales tax on food and food ingredients. There is a really long list specifically separating out what is considered a food and food ingredient and what's not. So I definitely recommend looking into that source as well. So for the contacts, it is the Tennessee Department of Revenue. Here is their email, revenues.support@tn.gov, and then their website as well. Here's their phone number as well. And then, all right, thank you so much for listening. I know that it is a lot of information and a lot of exemptions and a lot of rules, but it can be it can get all confusing, but it can all be worked out. Every farmer has a very unique situation.
All
And if you have
right.
any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Courtney. Looks like April raised her hand. April, do you want to pop something in the chat or you want to talk? Let me turn your mic on. All right, you should be able to unmute yourself now, April. You may not have meant to do that. Oh, she just wanted to congratulate you, Courtney, on an
So
excellent
thank
presentation.
you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing this with us. If anybody has any other questions for Courtney, feel free. You can pop those into the chat, or as I mentioned, raise your hand and other things. Courtney's contact information is up on the screen. Um, and I'll share that with you all in that follow-up email for this session as well. What I will go ahead and do now, Courtney, if you don't mind to stop sharing your screen, I will throw up our evaluation survey. So I mentioned that you can get Tennessee Agricultural Enhancement Program credit for participating in Daring to Learn. So the way that you do that is by completing this evaluation survey. So to get that TAEP credit, the way that works for the Daring to Learn series is you have between now and December 31st of 2026 to watch at least just five of the Daring to Learn sessions for this year. Fill out the evaluation survey. This QR code and the link will be at the end of every session, also included in the follow-up email that I'll send out. So watch 5 sessions, complete an evaluation form for 5 of those sessions between now and December 31st of 2026. And then your name will be turned into the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, verifying that you completed that educational credit. We don't do certificates for Daring to Learn or anything like that. Um, you just have your name turned into TDA to verify that you completed those educational requirements. So this is where you would access that evaluation form, and just want to make sure I haven't missed anything else in the chat box. I have not. Okay. Again, thank you to Courtney for sharing all that insightful information with us. And thank you guys for attending our first session of the new year for Daring to Learn. I look forward to spending the rest of the year with you guys. And for additional information about Daring to Learn, all of the sessions that are mapped out for this year are available on CPA's educational events page. But I'll also give you a glance or a glimpse into the next 3 months every time I send a reminder email. So our speaker for next month in February will be another one of CPA's extension specialist, Liz Mooneyham, talking about milk from a farmer's market perspective. So if you guys don't have any other questions for Courtney, those of you that are still with us, feel free to log off and go. I don't have anything else for you all, but I will keep recording just for the next few minutes in case we have any more questions. Otherwise, we will see you guys on February the 10th.